Right, hello and welcome to Interprint 2022. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Sibley and I'm the president of St Ives Photographic Club. It gives me great pride that during my inaugural year as president, we celebrate the 40th year of this competition that has gained such a positive reputation in the East Anglian region. As we prepared for this year's event, we were hopeful that the 40th anniversary of the Interprint competition and the 50th season of the club as a whole would return to the well-loved public exhibition and in-person judging of prints in St Ives that the competition has built its reputation around. Unfortunately, this wasn't to be, and for the second year running, we've been forced to adopt a digital online competition. These changes, along with all the usual event preparations, have been handled expertly by our team, and I'd like to thank Alice Kendrick, Karen Laws, Louisa Christie, Tim Norman, Debbie Hall and Dave Norman in particular for all their hard work this year. I would also like to thank you, the entering clubs, for your support in helping to make this a successful event. At a time when many clubs are unfortunately struggling to survive, I'm heartened that once again Interprint was fully subscribed. Please can I ask you to support our sponsors, without whom we could not continue our programme of competitions, exhibitions, talks and other events. We thank them particularly this year for their loyalty and generosity in what have been trying times for many businesses. So please mention them that you saw them in Interprint 22 when you respond to their ad votes, as I hope you will. It's now my pleasure to welcome our judges this year. It's David Smith, LRPS CPAGB BPE1. David is a member and former president of Woking Photographic Society and the immediate past president of the Surrey Photographic Association. A member of the PAGB Executive Committee, chair of the Interclub Print Championship Subcommittee, and a member of the Awards for Photographic Merit Subcommittee, where he is the administrator for the APM Online Advisory Service. David has been an SPA A-list judge and lecturer for a number of years. Formerly a travel and African safari photographer, the pandemic, like so many people, has meant that David has now changed that to being a portrait and a street photographer. So welcome, David. I'll now hand over to our competition secretary, Alice Kendrick, to start the judging. I hope you enjoy today's competition and may the best club win.
I couldn't have put it better myself, Brian. I'll start my screen share now. David, over to you.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this very prestigious competition. The standard of images was incredibly high, so very, very difficult for me to sort out. I could have sat down, given everything 18, 19 or 20, but my instructions were to be brave, not a word normally associated with me, but I have tried to be brave, spread the marks out, because in competitions, that's what we need to do. Otherwise, we'd have all the clubs all bunched together on 1 or 2 marks. So I have spread the marks out as best I can. But if your images come towards the lower end, don't forget it's one person's view on one day. There isn't a bad image in any of these. They're all really enjoyable. I've thoroughly enjoyed looking at them. And I can confirm I've seen them all in advance. So I've seen them in the best way they can be seen. I haven't pixel hunted. I've looked at them on my recently calibrated monitor. So there's been no attempt to go in behind what the photographer has presented. So that's a brief introduction and I'm now ready to start.
Okay. Ophelia.
I've seen quite a few of these recently of underwater people, shall we call them. What I particularly enjoyed about this one was the way in which even the subject's makeup, that deep red, is matching the deep red of the leaves that she's moving through the water with. The way the hair comes up on top, that just adds that extra little dimension. I'd have possibly preferred a little bit more room for it to move into, but generally a very, very competent picture. 16.
Death Strike.
Guess we probably needed a warning before this one, particularly with the blood. The very fast shutter speed, I think, works particularly well. And those water droplets coming from the fish's mouth just adds an extra dimension. Probably would have been stronger if we could have seen the eye, but in nature, you get what nature gives you. 15.
After the workout.
Lovely engagement between the photographer and the subject, and the way we've got the sort of sweat nestling on the body, that really gives us an extra sense, a real feeling that it is very much after the workout, sharp where it needs to be, losing just a little bit of definition at the top of the head, but a minor element on what's a quite strong image. 16.
Into the bend at 70 with no brakes.
The title certainly gives a sense of context for this. We know it's going incredibly fast. The way it's kicking up the gravel, that adds something to it as well. Interesting, the photographer's chosen to give us this in monochrome so that we're probably not distracted by the various advertising on the bike and on his clothing. The eyes are sharp. Not got a lot of light in there because you're never going to get a light in there. It's definitely giving us a sense of movement. It couldn't do anything else. 16.
Mated Gatekeepers.
There are some cracking macros in today's selection. This is the first we're seeing. We can see they are mating, beautiful detail, particularly on their wings. And this is what nature's produced. Absolutely gorgeous, beautifully sharp on both of the heads, cracking macro. 18.
Vulpes lagopus.
I just feel really, really cold looking at this. This poor little animal going into a headwind, going into the cold. The photographer in this case has really captured the extreme conditions these animals live in. Lovely image. 19.
African lion resigned to the rain.
But the monochrome, and interesting putting a line in monochrome. I've seen some, and I think this is as good as many. The eyes absolutely pin sharp as it needed to be with a lovely catch light. And what I also enjoy with this one is the way that mane comes down. And we can pick up the rain, not only in the background, but we can almost see the way it's nestled on the head of the lion itself. The right-hand side's a bit messy, but then again, nature can be quite messy. 17.
Try at the Quad Nations wheelchair rugby.
Not a sport I know, but the fast shutter speed, freezing the action, I think works really well. Not so much the guy with the ball itself, but the man behind him, that expression, open-mouthed, that really works. We can see the crowd behind, which gives us a sense of context, but they're nicely out of focus so that they're not really fighting for our attention. Great piece of sports photography. 17.
Amy.
Amy's nicely made up, and we've got a nice, interesting reaction between her and the photographer staring straight down the lens. Almost a bit of Rembrandt lighting with the triangle on her left and the right. We're looking to it. Losing a bit of hair at the top, and that right eye, as we're looking at it, her left eye is just that little bit dark, but that's the lighting the photographer wanted. So it's a question of style, really. Do you like that format? I do. I think it's working up to a point. 15.
Bounding mountain hare.
The photographer has really given themselves a challenge with this because shooting snow is always extremely difficult because the sensor is always going to react against that white. You normally need to open it 1.5 or 2 stops. To stop it all going completely grey. In this case, we've got a grey hair as well. So the photographer really gave themselves a challenge, which has been dealt with, I think, very, very effectively. 16.
Durdle door at sunrise.
Durdle door is one of those images I think many of us have seen quite a few times. All photography is about light, but landscape's probably the genre most dependent on the light. And the light is Okay for this. I think some strong light on the rocks, but of course at sunrise, the light is coming behind. Durdledor is often shown at sunset where we've got that light falling on the rocks. Very effective capture of that lovely sky at sunrise. Possibly the foreground could we've done with a little bit less of it, although I do enjoy that texture in the bottom left-hand corner. 16.
Drink me.
Very creative image. She's deliberately not looking at the camera. Very effective Lewis Carroll sort of effect. And Lewis Carroll lends himself to photography because he himself was an excellent photographer. So I think it really, really works. I like the fact the hair's messy. We've perched that hat on. All of those, I think, goes together really well. 18.
Sympathy for the devil.
I'm not sure the devil's going to get a lot of sympathy with this. Very creative. I enjoy the way we've got that flame effect all the way around. Possibly the least strongest bit of the two vertical lines either side of the skull, coming from the skull either side of the eyes. Coming down vertically, they're lighter than everything else. I'm not sure they're actually doing anything for the image. And that's what I keep looking at once I'd seen them. But very creative, sharp where it needs to be sharp. A lot of feeling in this image. 14.
Checkmate.
I'm touching this almost a bit of travel photography. We know we can see at the top it's in Shoreditch, but the interaction between the young lad, the chess person, and everybody else gathering around, engaging with it, I think it just works in so many ways. And what really works is the smiles on virtually everybody's face. Beautiful capture. 17.
Black hair streak.
Another cracking macro. The diagonal line gives a sense of dynamism. Diagonal lines always do that. And the fact that it's absolutely pin sharp where it needs to be. Gorgeous detail on the wings. 18.
Abandoned.
This is what I put in the genre of only photographer. Most people would walk past this thinking there are a few wrecked old boats. The photographer stops and thinks this is really interesting. An image like this really lends itself to a monochrome. The sky looks terrific. The boats themselves bringing out those textures works really well. Might have taken a little bit off the foreground, but it does work. 18.
Going.
Great title. As we can see, those feet have left the board. He's going to be underwater within a second. Terrific choice of shutter speed, capturing the action. We've already lost his right arm. Great piece of sports photography. 18.
Aging solitaire.
When we've got still life, it's very much in the photographer's control, and the lighting in particular, we're looking at what the photographer is producing, and the light, particularly on the vase in this case, I find works really, really well. There's quite a strong vignette. Generally, I think with vignettes, if you can really notice them, they've probably gone just a little bit too far. Particularly at the top, that vignette, just a little less, I think, might have drawn our attention more into it. It's just fighting for attention. But it's been the detail the photographer has captured in the rose and in the leaves and then in the vase really does work well. 16.
Cosmos.
I really enjoy the flower, particularly the center of the flower. The depth of field, I think, is absolutely spot on, and the exposure works also really, really well, that you've captured detail in all of the flower without any blown highlights. It's the background I'm not as convinced about. It's quite distinctive, particularly in the top left-hand corner, which probably cost it a couple of marks. But other than that, it's a really pleasing image. 16.
Wide through the gravel at Paddock Hill.
The title tells it all. That gravel is really kicking up. That dust cloud, absolutely fantastic, showing the speed and the way in which the car, the Merc, is going through it. Wasn't sure about the corner at first, particularly we got some red on, but it does, that diagonal line does give a sense of dynamism. Overall, I just felt perhaps the cloud is a little bit dominant in the image. It's really the car we want to see kicking up the gravel, not so much the cloud itself. But you've certainly captured the speed, and we've certainly got that car sharp. 14.
Opera House.
Yeah, another image I've seen quite a few times, but I think works really well in monochrome. The detail, the textures and the shape comes out very, very strongly indeed. And in this case, where the photographer is almost producing the same on either side, does add something extra to it. It's always interesting when we see something in landscape, in portrait orientation, and I think this has been very, very well captured. 17.
Buchalettiv Moor.
We've got some beautiful light falling on the mountain itself. And again, photography is all about light, but particularly in landscape. And the photographer has chosen that longer shutter speed to blur the water, not completely that glassy feel, which I think is a bit of a cliche nowadays. We can still see a bit of detail in it, but it's nicely blurred, and we've still got some nice light falling on the rocks, particularly in the center, in the foreground. 17.
Washing, Hooghly River, Kolkata.
I think it's been really well seen. Most of us would have gone completely past it, or taken the picture of the people washing, or shot it in color. Instead, the photographer's chosen bit of washing line, a vest that's seen better days, and the three figures are providing a bit of context. Good example of where an odd number works better than an even. You know, the three separated there look much better than two. And we've then got the river beyond and the bank on the far side. It's a very wide river, the Hooghly River in Kolkata. So I think it just is a great bit of travel photography. 17.
Dartford Warbler.
That bird is absolutely sharp, the eye's sharp, got a lovely catch light in the eye, and we've got a diagonal bit of branch coming out of the corner, showing a nice attention to detail with some lovely feathering. Possibly could have lost a little bit off the top. That top quarter is adding not really a great deal to it. The background's beautifully out of focus though. And I just saw this and I thought, oh, wouldn't that make a cracking print? I'm judging it as a PDI, and it's a lovely PDI. 16.
Low tide at Crosby.
Again, I've seen quite a few of these, but this one is not a cliche. Some of them are becoming a bit of a cliche. I'm really enjoying the way we've got that line coming in from the right-hand side and then sweeping around and taking us to the figure. The figure is just sharp enough, but we've got detail and texture and a great feeling throughout the whole of the image. Beautiful piece of work. 19.
Black Church, Green Sky.
The title tells it all. And I believe over this last winter, the Aurora Borealis has worked really well for photographers. If you can have been able to see it through cloud, this one works really well. But what adds that extra dimension is that bit of light just falling on the church's door. That really does add an extra dimension to it. 18.
Great crested grebes on nest.
The photographer's been very fortunate or got themselves in just the right position, that the grasses are falling either side. Okay, we've got one in the middle across the lower grebe, but nature's messy. This is going to happen. But the fact that they're between the two, that works really well. Nothing in the background that's going to distract our attention from the grebes themselves on the nest. The light's not brilliant on the grebes themselves, but they're absolutely sharp. The eyes are sharp, and they've been captured very effectively in the frame. 16.
The onlooker.
Great action shot, and I'm really pleased the photographer's chosen the fast shutter speed, freezing that action sharp where it needs to be. So the depth of field and the shutter speed have worked really well. We've got that fish with two of them fighting over it, and the one behind. Just adds something extra to it. 18.
Dewey latticed heath moth.
Another cracking macro. And in this case, the way the dew is resting on not only the moth itself, but on the green on the right-hand side. That looks beautiful. Nothing in the background to distract us. Very narrow depth of field, so that the second antennae, as we're looking at it, the left-hand antennae on the moth itself goes out of focus very quickly. The right antennae also goes out of focus. It's a very nitpicking point, which I really don't want to do, but it just makes it fall behind some of the other macros in other competitions. This would have been a stunner, and it's still pretty good. 17.
Beam backflip.
This had to have that shutter speed absolutely spot on, and it is absolutely frozen the action, but because of the way in which the backflip's gone, that's working really well. Sharp where it needs to be. Beautiful light falling particularly on her torso and the head. The beam itself works well, and nothing at all in the background to distract us. There's a couple of these in this competition. I have no idea whether the same photographer or not, but they're both pretty good. We'll start with this one, 19.
Osteria lazuka.
Great bit of travel photography in that, for me, it captured the sense of time and that sense of place. That starting in the foreground, the way in which our eyes led into the steps over the canal, beautiful lighting, particularly on the Osteria itself, and the starbursts on the lights, the three lights, but the photographer still giving us interest all the way through, the beautiful light coming from the windows. Great piece of travel photography. 19.
Orange tip butterfly.
These macros just keep on coming, and in this case, absolutely sharp, and even the antennae, pretty sharp. The left-hand one of the butterfly's going out a bit, but it's still pretty sharp, given a great sense of context, and the way in which we've got some greeny tones on the butterfly itself and yellows that are picked up on the greens on the right-hand side. Just another terrific macro. 19.
Freckles.
I love the title. Great engagement between the subject and the photographer. Absolute starry-eyed, and almost, those eyes are almost a little bit too much for me, just a little bit too wide-eyed, but lovely lighting forming on the youngster, just picking up enough of the fringe and the hair. Very narrow depth of field, but that doesn't matter. It's all about the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. 15.
Herring gull running on water.
Another fast shutter speed that's frozen the action. And what a terrific action that's been frozen. The herring gull that's got the fish taking off with its wings in position and the one behind following. We've got some nice light falling on them, and often herring gulls can be very difficult because they're very bright, and that white can be a blown highlight terrifically easy. But now the photographer's got this one absolutely spot on. 19.
Night games at the end of the pier.
Great narrative for this one, I felt. The way in which we've got the single person, we've got the feeling of darkness, and the two lampposts on either side holding us in from either side, so they're providing a nice edge to both the left and right hand side as we're looking at it, and throwing some nice light on the person themselves. It is rather casting some strong light on Lord Charles, not Lord Charles himself, but on the top of the box, and inevitably where we see writing, our eyes are drawn to it. The writing at the bottom of the box, Lord Charles here, that's acceptably dark. It's just that strong light falling on the writing of Lord Charles really pulls my attention away from the young boy and the one-armed bandit. But the rest of the lighting, I think, works really, really well. 15.
Marbled white butterfly on a grass stem.
Another terrific macro. Beautiful detail in the butterfly. Again, nitpicking a bit, the antennae are going out of focus, but there's a lovely golden feeling on the grass head. Right at the top, though, there's something really quite strongly coloured, whereas the rest of the background doesn't have any colour at all. I'm sure it's been picking up from other grass stems, but it just caught my attention because it's on the edge of the frame, and in a competition like that, it's just going to lose it 1 or 2 marks. 17.
Beam reach, here I come.
Great sports photographer who's captured this, because they've got the shutter speed right, and they've got themselves in a position where it looks as though they're going to be mown down by the speed this boat's heading towards them. So courage has certainly been a hallmark of the way this one's been taken. It's a tight crop, but I suspect that was necessary given where the image was taken. Possibly a little bit too much on the right-hand side as we're looking at it, where a little bit much more on the left-hand side would have produced, for me, a slightly better balance. But nevertheless, a really good piece of sports photography. 17.
Footsteps in the rain.
Nice piece of street photography. Street photographers often struggle to do well in competition. I love the redness and the way in which that catches the reflection and draws our eye in. Using water always is attractive, but using water on pavements really does add something special to it. Just taking the legs, very interesting crop, much more creative than many. 17.
Rosie.
Nice piece of narrative to this image. The square crop, I think, works well. The old-fashioned hoop and clothing. Yes, it's probably staged, but does that matter when the photographer has captured that great sense of time and place? Been beautifully produced. Another one, oh, I wish I could have seen it as a print, because I bet it's an absolute stunner. 19.
Guard duty.
Unless we've got a photographer who is probably about 200 years older or more, taken at either a reenactment or a workshop. Nothing wrong with that if you manage to capture something of the day, and I think you have. He's dressed for the occasion, looking out from the window. That works well. The uniform works well. I'm not getting the sense of narrative, though, of what he's looking out onto. So guard duty, yeah, you've made the best of what you could, but I think we just needed to see a little bit more through the window. But you've got the exposure of the guy and through the window working really well. 14.
The Warrior and His Hound.
Another workshop, very Games of Thrones feeling to this one. Beautiful engagement, not only with the model himself, but also the dog with the photographer. Both absolutely down the lens, sharp eyes, and the way in which the dog is almost merging into the fur around the shoulders of the model and his wig or hair, that does work very well indeed. 18.
The Girl in the Red Dress.
I enjoy this image, and I definitely think this would be so much better as a print on a piece of art paper, but it's a PDI. And judging as a PDI, the girl in the red dress at the bottom half of the image is working well. I'm not so sure about the top part of the image in the middle. It's very bright, and we've got this texture on it, which is fighting for my attention. I think my attention needs to be drawn down to the girl in the red dress, not to that very bright textured bit in the middle at the top. Very creative, but hasn't quite worked for me. 14.
Red Deer Stag Bellowing in the Mist.
We're told nowadays with nature that they've got to be showing some element of behavior. Well, this is certainly showing some element of behavior. And what really works for me is the way in which the light is catching the top of the antlers. Nothing in the background to distract us, but some nice, soft, almost watercolor detail in the bracken and everything else growing in the foreground, but lovely detail, particularly in the fur on the stag himself. 18.
Namibian Cheetah.
Perhaps in contrast to the previous image, the cheetah isn't really exhibiting any form of animal behavior, and the cheetah's pretty much in shadow. Nothing in the background to distract us, and cheetahs do spread themselves out and lay down like this under trees. It's the eyes look a little soft, possibly because we're not getting a lot of light falling on the cheetah's head. But the fur of the cheetah's been picked out beautifully, and it gives us a sense of context. 15.
Searching for Life.
Love the title, love the sky. I've seen a lot more astrophotography, probably started during lockdown when it was one of the few genres, new genres that people could get into. And I've certainly seen, from people like Wex, Park Cameras, etc., a lot more adverts for photography related for astrophotography. The silhouette works really well at the bottom, and the detail the photographer has captured in the sky really works. 18.
Museum of Curiosities 5.
Another image that would look great, I think, on the right sort of textured paper as a print, but it's not a print, it's a PDI. Does it work as PDI? Yes, I think it does. Not one for anacrophobes, probably would terrify many anacrophobes, but it's been beautifully presented, beautifully put together. 20.
That's by Anne Miles. Below the Summit, Mont Blanc.
The light is catching the snow, but the snow hasn't been cast into grey. But what made it for me is those three figures. They really present a sense of scale. We know Mont Blanc is very high. We know it's enormous, but those three figures just give us that sense of scale. Whether the photographer knew or it was a bit of luck, right place, right time, they were definitely in the right place, right time, and really dealt with this light very, very effectively. 18.
Full steam on the curve.
There's a judge I know who always, when he sees these, would say, oh, 8:30 you took the image. You've got to look at the front of the train to understand that comment. Videographers, of whom my wife's one, love steam trains because they make a lot of noise, they create steam, they create smoke, they create movement. Many still photographers love them as well. And in this case, particularly coming around the curve and the way the steam and smoke's going off into the distance, that also works very, very effectively. 17.
Andalusian stallion.
Definite sense of movement and the way particularly the hind legs are kicking up the dust. Eyes are sharp, depth of field works really well, works in mono. 18.
Rearing horse.
I suspect this one just suffers a little bit. That's the look of the draw coming after the previous extremely strong image. It just isn't quite as strong. I don't know why. I think it's probably because the foreground of this one is rather dominant. It's pretty much 50% of the image. So those grasses, lovely detail in the grasses and textures, but it's fighting for our attention with the stallion itself. But it's rearing, it's working well, it's sharp where it needs to be. It is an action shot. It's definitely doing something. 16.
Turbine tutus.
Love the title. That, I think, just adds an extra dimension to it. And then the way in which our eye is drawn in from those two strong lead-in lines from the bottom and left-hand corner to the dominant, let's call it the 2-2, and the others beyond. It's a nitpicking thing, but a separation between the three on the right is somehow more effective than the separation of the three on the left as we're looking at it, in that two of them cut into one another and one cuts into the strong vertical line we have in the middle. Sky works really well. 15.
Early morning on the Norfolk Broads.
A beautiful red you can get on those skies at the right time. I think I know where this is with the windmill there. I wasn't sure about the horizon where it was, but I really wouldn't want to lose any of that reflection in the foreground, and that sky is so enjoyable. I didn't want to lose any of that either. Compositionally, I'm not too sure if the two strongest elements for me are the windmill and the boat. So they don't, the house in the middle isn't for me the most interesting element, but the photographers really captured that morning light very effectively. 16.
Timor Lighthouse.
I'm seeing almost two images here. The left rock with the purple flowers, and then the very effective line leading us into the lighthouse. And it's acceptably sharp all the way through to the background. So interesting foreground, middle ground and background. And the fact that the lighthouse is almost resting on the horizon is a little bit of attention to detail that works really well. The lighthouse is on the third, and I think it's a lovely example of, the composition rules using the thirds when they work really well. 17.
Waiting for the snow.
Yeah, I'm getting that feeling of the storm, snowstorm coming in from behind the mountains. The shutter speed is a bit like one we saw earlier, not too slow a shutter speed, so the water is just milky. We're getting a sense of movement as it's coming down. But for me, again, landscape, it's all about the light. We've got some very effective light falling on that very dark triangular mountain on the left, but also falling on the water. Not always easy to get light at this time of year when we've got snow. the photographer really has made the best of the light available. 18.
Time to go.
I'm not entirely sure the narrative of this image is coming through as strongly as it might. Yeah, we've got the hands together, we've got a watch through a train carriage doorway, but I'm not seeing anything else on the platform. It's not waving, it's not interacting with anybody else. So the narrative isn't really coming through very strongly for me with this one. It is sharp weight, should be sharp. Those hands, probably aged hands. That's giving me possibly a sense of the person, but it hasn't really worked for me, I'm sorry to say, with this one, particularly in narrative terms. 13.
Brancaster boats.
I don't know whether the photographer in this case has chosen to use ICM or in post, or is just actually using a long shutter speed. It doesn't matter. Does it work? I think, yes, it works very effectively, particularly on the right-hand side in the middle. On the left-hand side, that boat is very prominent, much more than all of the others. And the brightest part of the image is below that boat. So that isn't working quite as well. The rest of it is very effective, and I love the tones in the sky. 16.
Wild little owl, Athene noctua.
The owl's absolutely staring down the lens for you. The eyes are sharp. We've got some nice catch light in the eyes. Yeah, we've got a lot of man-made elements here, but that's where these birds are. Nothing in the background to distract us. The light, I feel, was a little flat when you took it, but you made the best you can. Owls do not necessarily appear with the lighting you want. 15.
That's our final image for this half. So I will go ahead and put up the scores so far. At half time, our leaders with 54 points are Corby Photographic Club. And you can see there are 5 clubs vying for second, all on 53. So it's a very close fought race so far. The green score there from Cambridge is the only 20 as yet. I think we'll have a break just now. So we'll take a quick break to go and get a coffee. Obviously, we'd love to be sharing coffee and cakes with you in the church, but I'm afraid you'll have to rely on your own kettles this time. Well, welcome back. I think we have had a nice break. I will start again. And our first image of the second half is Blackbird tossing back a pink berry.
Great one to start the second half with. Again, it's showing some behavior which always lifts nature images up a notch. It's more than a bird on a stick. We've got a lovely catch light in the eye, and the fact that almost that berry is positioned evenly between the top and lower jaws of the beak works really well. Nothing in the background to distract us, sharp where it needs to be, lovely bit of animal behavior. 19.
Caterpillar feet.
Well, I think I've mentioned more than once, I'm sure we've got some great macros in this competition, but this one is completely different. I have never seen a macro of caterpillar feet. Showing it in this way with that diagonal line really adds some interest. The light falling on it is absolutely beautiful. bringing out the detail in those hairs. Never seen anything like it. Love it. And you won't be surprised with that build up. 20.
That's by Ian Slack. Monarch of the Glen.
So our second stag, lovely engagement, if that is true, between the stag and the photographer, although you might be a long distance away with a long lens and he doesn't know you're photographing him. But again, it's the way in which we've got beautiful detail on the fur. The eyes are sharp, although the stag's left eye, with just that little bit more light, would have risen it a notch, but some lovely light falling on the top of the antlers. 17.
A Delicate Situation.
I'm assuming it's a workshop, or the photographer lives with some very strange friends. We've got a narrative there, looking through, holding on to the gun. The light's never going to be brilliant when you're shooting these. I'm getting some feeling of that light coming through Venetian blinds. That is working well. Again, as we had the guy looking through the window earlier, my eyes wondering what he's looking at. In this case, I'm getting a little bit more of a narrative, but it's not working fully for me in terms of that narrative. 15.
Ouch, the wicketkeeper felt that one.
Yeah, it's the expression on the wicketkeeper's face, isn't it? Which the title tells us where to look at that. Yeah, I felt it as well. Nothing in the background to distract us, but sometimes with sport, we need a little bit more than the main protagonist, possibly a fielder, a square leg or whatever, or a slip. That might have added a little bit of context, but it's all about the fact the photographer's captured that red cricket ball in just that position. 16.
Playing in the coal yard.
She doesn't look at all happy, does she? And we can see why. That kiss is not something she wanted. Even the teddy bear doesn't look very happy either. The monochrome, I think, does give a sense of time and place, and the way in which the clothes of the children does give us a sense that this is a reenactment. It's looking back with that carved gun that the little boy's got. I'm not sure how much of it is workshop, how much of it is photographer input. I think there's a fair bit. 15.
Despair.
This said to me prison, both the uniform, the stairs and the landings, and the photographer didn't need to put that in the title, but we didn't want an engagement with the subject here and the photographer, just that very sad face looking down. But for me, it's all about the lighting falling on the photographer, absolutely sharp where it needs to be, an awful lot of emotion in this image. 18.
Bithia sprater showing its proboscis.
I'm not going to say it's another terrific macro. I have done, because it is, look at the detail the photographer has captured in this. It's almost as though it were under a microscope. The detail, what it's doing, the fact that that eye has been beautifully captured. You can't get catch lights in eyes like that. We've got that leaf coming in through from the bottom corner. Again, a little bit of attention to detail that really works. Everything about this image sings quality. 20.
That's by Stacey Purkis. Too many to count.
I think this is the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. There are too many to count. It's very evocative scene to visit, and I think the photographer has captured something of the feeling you get when you do visit, and the fact that it's snowing adds a sense of desolation to what is already quite a desolate scene. 16.
Oh, to be back in Africa.
Very interesting montage, which I think works. At first, I wasn't too sure about the reflection, but yeah, that mirror image does add something. And the contrast between the ice and the very hot feeling on the right-hand side, that also works. As a montage, I can't see the join, so the photographer deserves every credit for that. 18.
Gymnast and ribbon.
So this is the second one we've had like this, but in this case, again, we've got some great light falling on the face and the figure themselves. But the way in which the photographer has got that ribbon coming out and in no point cutting across any element of the figure. I think if I'd been there all day and she performed all day, I suspect every single image I'd have taken, that ribbon would have been cutting across her in some way in my image. Nothing in the background to distract us. The beam at the bottom really holds our attention down to there and then up. Lights falling on it, beautiful. It just works in so many ways. Nice little line round, you just put a line of 1 or 2 pixels. Outstanding image. 20.
That's by Andy Guttridge. Boats at anchor.
Great shot from above, and I don't know whether this was just chance or it was how they were set, but the fact that they go from large to small as our eye goes up that very strong vertical line, it just really adds something to it. Lovely colours, taken from above and all the stronger for it. 18.
Edge of the world.
I can see what the photographer's doing in this case. It's a creative image. It isn't quite working for me. It was an imaginative attempt for what the photographer intended. It just isn't giving me any sense of dynamism or any sense of jeopardy. Sharp it needs to be, almost works, but not quite. 13.
Waiting.
I'm seeing 2 images here, really. The duck and the grasses on the right-hand side. I think the grasses alone make a very interesting and attractive image, but the fact the ducks got the same colours of the grasses means they do complement each other in this image. The light wasn't brilliant, but again, you've made the most of what you could. It's looking a little bit grey in the foreground, but that's because photographing snow is so extraordinarily difficult with the way in which that bright light bouncing back off the snow tries to fool the camera sensor. But the both elements I enjoy and they do hang together well. 16.
Water rail.
I enjoy the way in which we've got that catch light in the eye and the bird's got plenty of space to move into, nice detail in the feathering, and yeah, it's messy. It's messy certainly in the background and messy in the foreground, but as I said earlier, nature's messy. Possibly a little bit more blurring in the background, a slightly different choice of depth of field might have improved it a tad. We've got some nice light falling on it, particularly on the head and on the beak. 17.
Waking leopard, Tanzania.
Well, the photographer, I'm sure, couldn't possibly have known it, but this is my favourite big cat. Love leopards. beautiful light falling on the eyes, which are absolutely sharp. The whiskers are sharp. They do wedge themselves into trees like this. I'm sure the way in which you looked up and saw it, very difficult to photograph because you've got some strong light coming from behind. Yeah, it's not doing anything other than waking, but it's been beautifully captured. 18.
Collecting nectar.
We've got it doing something. The purple flowers work well. We can see the nectar in the way it's already on the insect's legs. The antennae are sharp, sharp everywhere it needs to be. Nothing in the background to distract us. We can see that detail, particularly on the hair of the insect. Lovely. 19.
Camelscape.
It's always good to get down to a low angle to photograph, but as I always say, it's not the getting down that counts, it's the getting back up that matters. I've always found a very strong monopod to be an indispensable tool, even if you never use it as a monopod. Photographers got down really well, and compositionally, just getting the man between the back of one camel and the front of the other in just the right place. And the fact that the camel in the foreground on the left-hand side has got his mouth open just adds something else extra to this image. 18.
Common blue damselfly.
This must be extraordinarily difficult to have captured, the way in which you've got those legs coming around what I assume is a piece of grass, the wings behind, we can see all four, but particularly the two with the water droplets. It's looking straight at you. Terrific, another terrific macro. 20.
That's by Diane LeCount. Eyes on the finishing line.
So in this case, the photographer has really chosen a fast shutter speed to catch that mud kicking up behind. I've got a great sense of movement. I think color works well in this one, but the thing that makes it really work is the fact you've got the eyes and you've got those eyes sharp. The fact that you've got those eyes sharp, looking forward towards the finishing line, that works really well. Terrific sports image. 20.
That's by Mike Crack. Old olive tree.
Very evocative image, very much of its time and place. I've seen a few of these, and sometimes people have used ICM to give us a different perspective, or actually taken them when it's a little bit windy to move those branches round. In this case, olive trees, they're all about the gnarled trunk, because these are very, very old, and the contrast between the gnarled trunk and the almost grey colour of the leaves in the tree itself. Very bright foreground, which I just feel might have been darkened down a little bit. And this is one where a very subtle vignette, particularly in the top right-hand corner, might have added something to it. But still very enjoyable. 15.
On point.
You know, the photographers captured this technique really well, I'm assuming using flash for the final image. And we're getting that sense of progression, moving across from left to right as we're looking at it. And we read from left to right. That is the way it should work. 17.
I've got my eye on you.
Creative use of only having a very small element of the image in focus. Those eyes are pin sharp as they certainly needed to be with this one. I'm not sure all the way around, possibly a portrait orientation or just cropping it even a little bit tighter, because certainly on the bottom left and the bottom right, it isn't working compositionally as well as it might. but it's sharp where it needs to be. And it's been a very interesting way of depicting the image. 16.
Moonset at sunrise.
As soon as I saw that, I felt the temperature of the of this landscape, particularly on the left-hand side, but that beautiful light falling on the gold on the right-hand side. So what the photographers captured in this case is a remarkable contrast between cold blue and warm gold, and that for me made it really interesting. The windmill beyond gives us a sense of place, and the fact that the moon's there as well, that also works very effectively. 18.
Sam Kolek.
The fact the photographers got themselves immediately in front of the subject, again risking being mowed down, the shutter speed absolutely spot on, that the way in which that water's been kicked up behind, sharp where it needs to be. This just for me captures an enormous sense of power, determination and movement. 19.
Indian Langur, morning light.
Beautiful catchlight on the eyes, and that morning light is producing an almost silky feeling to the monkey's fur. Not easy to take because that whiter fur around the head, around the face is black, it's whiter fur around the head. That often gives yourself a real challenge, but that you've captured that very effectively. Nothing in the background to distract us, so all our eyes, attention goes right onto the monkey itself. It's not actually doing a great deal, and that probably is where that right arm coming down, the monkey's right arm, it's really catching my attention. It's coming down, but it's not actually doing anything. It's not grasping anything. It's not moving anything. That's probably where it fell down a bit. But the light's lovely. 15.
View to nowhere.
I love the simplicity of this image and the way in which our eye starts on the left and goes right all the way through. The detail sharp from front to back, the atmospheric feeling. I'm getting a feeling of sense of place. And of course, I couldn't possibly get a sense of place. Very creative, beautifully produced. The letterbox crop suits it perfectly. 20.
That's by John McDowell. Tight squeeze.
Yeah, the way the photographers captured this, you wonder how it actually managed to get through those sharp shards of glass that have been left from the broken window. The fact it's at a diagonal really gives us a sense of dynamism. I'm also enjoying even the damaged wood and the damaged glass inside and round the building. Not sure the eyes are absolutely pin sharp, but it's probably coming to you at such a speed. This was absolutely the best you could do. 18.
Skeletal tulips.
Beautifully positioned, and the way in which the photographer has, I'm assuming, bent them to present the image they want. The background is so complementary with that faint hue, that works together really well. And the separation between them and the position the photographer's chosen to put the tulips in just works so well. Enjoyed this one a lot. 19.
Farmyard friends.
I know I have seen this image before. No idea where, but I know I've seen it. But I've seen it as a print. And it was an absolutely stunning print, outstanding print. I'm not so sure it works as well as a PDI. And that's not surprising because monochromes often work better as a print. It's still good, sharp when it needs to be, got a bit of narrative. It works, And I do apologise to the photographer in this case, that I'm probably comparing it unfairly to a print, whereas if I'd just seen this, it might have scored a little higher. But yeah, it's really good. It's just I keep thinking back to that print, which was an absolute stunner. 17.
Highland Cow.
I enjoy this image. We can't see its eyes. We don't want to see its eyes because that's what these cows look like. The treatment the photographer's given works really well. And it's all about the detail in its fringe and those horns and the way everything blends together perfectly. 18.
Freedom.
Extraordinary trousers, but match the top. And of course, where he stood and against the blue, your eyes drawn to him the minute you see him. The thing I'm not sure about this is that line coming out the bottom left-hand corner. Compositionally, it works really well, but it does mean about a quarter of the image is on the foreground of those rocks, which for me are the least strong part of the image. And I just wondered, taking a little bit off that bottom, so all our attention's drawn to that strong line going into the water, and the fact the depth of field is such that it's acceptably sharp all the way to the horizon and beyond. I think compositionally might have worked a little stronger, but it's certainly a very interesting image. 17.
Nuthatch.
It's interesting to see a nuthatch the right way up, as it were, because nuthatches, you normally see images of them upside down. Sharp where it needs to be. It's got the nut in its beak. That works really well. Lovely feathering, little tight against the left-hand margin. I don't know whether it would be possible for you to put a little bit more, just a little bit more looking room on the left-hand side. Depth of field means it's going out of focus pretty quickly towards the tail. But what you obviously what you wanted to concentrate on is that head, the beak and the nut. That does work well. 16.
The hunter.
Eyes sharp coming towards us, extraordinarily difficult to photograph. Although we see lots of birds in flight, for those who haven't done it, it can lead to a feeling, oh, they can't be that difficult to take. They are. My question with this one is the amount of negative space. I know some photographers would say, give it a lot, so all our eyes' attention is drawn in to those yellow eyes of the owl itself. For me, I just felt there was just a tad too much, particularly in the foreground. But capturing that bird itself, that has worked. 16.
Good boy.
Fast shutter speed, freezing the action of the horse as it goes into the water, and the way the rider's eyes are looking, not so much of where they are, but where they're going. And that's what I'm sure it's in 3-day eventing. That's what the rider is always doing. It's not what they've done, it's what they're going to have to do next. I just wondered about a slightly different depth of field, because the bush in the background is quite prominent, particularly on the left-hand side. The rider and the horse, though, are absolutely sharp. 16.
Still life of peas.
Very interesting to produce purple peas as well as the green peas, and the bronzy feeling, the lights picking up on the bronze receptacle on the right-hand side. For a still life, I'd have wondered about possibly a light coming from behind. Very, very small, just to give a bit of rim lighting, particularly to that bronze receptacle. Because a still life, it's all yours. not sure the blue of the material goes as well with the purple, but the light falling on the center, which at the end of the day is what a still life is all about, is outstanding. 18.
Domination.
Very creative image, and I particularly enjoy the boots and the way resting on the skulls. My eye is a little drawn to the area, as we're looking at the very bright area in the sky to the left of the boot. And that actually, once I saw it, the brightest part is pulling my attention away from the boot and the skulls themselves. I think the boot and the skulls, they really work. I think just darken down that area to the left. 17.
The bogeyman.
I'm assuming this is a model or somebody you just met. The light falling on the face works really well, particularly on the beard and the eyes. And we've got that engagement between the person who's taking the image and the subject of the image, and that always works well. The hat's very dark, but the photographer has got that light coming up under the eyes very, very effectively. So either the light positioning or the reflecting, that is working really well. 16.
Violet sylph.
Definitely exhibiting some element of behavior, and the way it's got its beak right into the center of the flower, that works beautifully. Often on these, because these wings vibrate and they move incredibly quickly, for a sense of place, we often just like those edges of the wings slightly out of focus. There's nothing in the background to distract us. In fact, there's nothing at all. And I'm wondering whether this was taken at a workshop where you've got a background deliberately put there with nothing, or you've chosen to remove the bird and the flower from a background to give us a neutral background. Again, it's not quite giving that sense of place. But overall, it's still an excellent image. 17.
Rugby in the rain.
I think I mentioned earlier that often where you haven't got a crowd being very prominent in a sports image can often mean we lose a sense of happening. But in this case, we don't need to. The photographer gave themselves an enormous challenge photographing in the rain, because you're obviously going to struggle. The light was definitely not on your side, but you've still managed to capture speed, you've managed to capture movement. The guy to the left, as we're looking at it, of the one with the ball, those eyes intently looking at the ball. I think this was a terrific image taken in incredibly challenging conditions. 19.
26 over.
So another 3-day eventing image. For me, in this case, it's all about the expression on the guy's face. Eek, you know, he's almost saying eek as he goes over. We can see the horse is looking to where it's going next. We can see he's looking to where he's going next. He's not coming off. Fast shutter speed, obviously, definite sense of movement, nothing to distract us as that bank goes up beyond him. Great piece of sport photography. 18.
Send in the clowns.
I was going to say, I can see a narrative in this. No, I can't see a narrative, but I can see a beautifully put together image. The intense gaze between the clown in the middle and the photographer really works. All three have intense gazes, but that middle one, the makeup's different on each. That works well. Send in the Clowns, quite evocative given recent death, works beautifully. The light forming on the hair, that also adds something. And the fact that the red hair is picked up by the red buttons and edging on the costumes, terrific image. 20.
That's by Roger Bradshaw. Flying the Flag.
Fast shutter speed, and the photographer has managed to just press the shutter or sprayed and prayed and got it right, that the eyes are not obscured by the water. It must have been, I'm sure if you did spray and pray, 90%, 99% the images, there was water over her face. You managed to get that image with the eyes sharp and water not obscuring it. Tightly cropped, but by tightly cropped, we've got great sense of speed, and the fact that her mouth's open as well, that also adds something to it. 18.
Zach Pearson.
Again, as we've had earlier, sometimes one follows another. In this case, again, very fast shutter speed. The eyes are sharp, the mouth's open. This gets 1 mark higher, so you can already tell what it's going to be, probably because it isn't quite as tightly cropped. So we're seeing a little bit more of the action. 19.
Morant's Curve.
Our second image of a train coming around a curve. This case, it's more atmospheric because the photographer's choosing to give us much more of where the photograph's been taken as it comes through the snow-covered forest and the mountains beyond. I think that little bit of colour on the train itself really adds something to this. I can see some people tempted to put this in monochrome. I think that little bit of colour of the blue engine, the red and then the yellow just towards the end before it goes round the corner adds something to this image. Depth of field works remarkably well. 17.
Last Race at Brighton.
It's not a sport I really have any time for, but hasn't the photographer captured this so effectively? Those three in the lead are absolutely sharp, and they can't have been all in the same plane of focus. So the choice of aperture has worked. The two behind are giving a sense of context. Fast shutter speed, they're kicking up the sand in the track. The concentration on each of the three dogs, but particularly that one in the middle. I think it shows, again, the rule of odds. The fact that we've got three leading. If it had been 2 and 3 behind, it wouldn't have worked at all well. The fact it's monochrome, and I think the monochrome works effectively because they'll have had various colour on their numbers. Just works on every level. Won't be surprised to hear 20.
That's by John Bulpett. Last Chance for Crabbing.
Nice shot of the pier coming in and the single figure with the water drawing us in from the bottom right in towards the rest of the sea and the way in which it goes towards the pier itself. The issues I'm not sure about is the amount of sky. There is an awful lot of sky, and it's not really holding my interest pretty much in the top third. I just wonder whether this would have worked more effectively if you'd turned it from right to left so that water drew our eye in from the left-hand side, and then done a very courageous letterbox crop. Then I think visually it would have had more impact. colours are beautiful and the exposure works really well. 14.
Wicken Fen.
Another astrophotography, and the way in which the photographer has captured that sky works really well. And the fact we've got some light falling on the windmill, that also, particularly on the brighter part of the windmill, that also is very, very effective. It's the top bit of the windmill where it's catching the sky, it's just sort of merging into itself there. And that's not quite the strongest part of the image. And we've got a very, very bright bit at the bottom right as we're looking at it of the windmill. I think that could have been very easily darkened down or removed. It's once my eye had caught that, it keeps going back to it. And yeah, it's just nearly there. Sky though, sky's excellent. 16.
Kestrel landing on post.
You're repeating myself, people think, see quite a few of these, birds in flight are easy to capture. No, they ain't. And this is beautiful in the way the kestrel's coming down, its talons are about to grasp the post. That's a little bit of man-made, but that's where it's going to rest. And it's so worn, it really doesn't even look man-made. Nothing in the background to distract us. Eye, beak, talons, absolutely sharp. And look at that beautiful feathering. 19.
Laughter in Hoi An.
Interesting piece of travel photography. It's not the photographer's fault, but isn't it sad? It's a plastic bag, not another wicker bag like the bags that the produce to the right is put in. You know, we've got that plastic bag, we've got a white plastic bucket, where it's so much better if we can get them with the wicker baskets. Not your fault, that's what it is nowadays. Their hats are terrific. They're laughing with each other, their eyes are shut, but I don't think that matters. The scales I enjoy. It's just possibly the balance between the image. They're very much on the left, which means those scales are catching my attention on the right, and the bright, again, plastic bags behind the scales. A nice piece of travel photography. 16.
Luke Mossy, pole sitter, British Superbikes.
Another motorbike shot where you may remember in a previous one, I said how much I really enjoyed the fact the photographer had managed to capture the eyes through the visor. In this case, you couldn't. The visor's black. There's no way you could have captured the eyes through the visor. It's just when you do, it lifts it that little bit. But in this case, what the photographer has captured very, very effectively is the speed, either through panning or in post. It really doesn't matter how the photographer did it. We're really getting that sense of speed. We've got speed, we've got room for the bike and rider to move into, so compositionally that works. That white line about the quarter of the way down is very bright. Might just have been toned down a bit, and his left shoulder is also just a little bit bright. 16.
Flower power.
I've seen quite a lot of these recently, and well, are they in danger of becoming a cliche? Possibly, but in this case, I think the way the photographer's captured the arch of the back and the movement and the fast shutter speed means it still works. And the way her hair is catching the light, particularly towards the top of the frame, that has worked very effectively. As a PDI, because it's black on the left-hand side, just put a key line round just 1 or 2 pixels so that my eyes are just drifting off towards the left, won't drift towards the right because of the strong light there. Yeah, it works. 17.
Cosmos.
A good example of a photograph that does not have to be sharp in the main element of the subject, because I don't think anything of the cosmos is sharp. Possibly the sharpest element is the grass on the right-hand side. If we look on that right-hand side with the very strong vertical line coming up, that's the bit I'm not quite as happy about. There's two very strong, very bright elements at the top, and they just, because they're so sharp, catching my eye. I love the cosmos, both the one in the foreground and the one in the background, and the background itself is beautifully out of focus. 16.
Comet over St Ives.
I don't know whether you knew the comet was going to be there, or you just right place at right time, but you were absolutely right place, right time with that comet moving. Beautiful light coming from St Ives itself. You could sell this, I'm sure, as a postcard of St Ives. It's working really well. The fact that the sky isn't black, but it's blue, works very, very effectively. So you're not only right time, right place, right time of day. And the fact we've got some lovely reflections from the bridge and the buildings, that also worked for me very, very well indeed. 18.
Blue diamond.
Yeah, ice really does look like this. It really does look blue. Something to do about the physics of light and the way in which the photographer has captured that light. Again, it's all about the light. Looks really well. Shutter speed, very effective. Nice light coming in from those streaks going towards the second piece of ice. Very effective. 18.
Proud parents.
I'm assuming this must be a montage, because I don't see how any photographer, even Graham Hall himself, could have got those pups and the two adults with separation to sit roughly all on the same plane of focus, get them all sharp and lit like that. Does it matter? No, of course it doesn't matter. But doesn't it work? There is an odd number of pups, but I don't think it'd have mattered if there are only 4. Beautiful light falling on them, particularly on the eyes of the adults. The way the light picks up the floppy spaniel ears, and the way, particularly the one on our left, alert looking up. Yeah, I'm sure it's a montage. It doesn't matter if it's a montage. If it isn't, I don't know how you did it. 19.
Chroma surfers.
Almost a Lowry-esque feel I felt to this image. He'd probably had them sharper, but the way in which the photographer has produced this works really well. The horizon on the third, it's a good example of where the rule of thirds works. And I'm getting a definite sense of movement, a definite sense of people enjoying themselves, but using light, using movement, using the whole way photography can blend together very effectively. Very, very effective image. 18.
That's our final image of the competition. So now all that's left is to reveal the scores. This is as they occurred. And I can now sort them into order to show that our winners this year are Cambridge Camera Club with 113 points. Behind them in second are Pico with 109, and in third, Ware District with 106. And I have marked all the 20s there as well. I can now also show you those panels. So Ware and District, third overall, had these 6 images. Pico, second overall, had these 6. And our winners, Cambridge, had these 6. I'm sure you'll agree, all fantastic images. So very well done to Cambridge. What remains now is to award the ribbons and medals. The first ribbon goes to Ian Slack of Stevenage Photographic Society for Caterpillar Feet.
In a collection of superb macros, this was one of the best. And the fact that the photographer's given us a caterpillar from an angle I've never seen it before on the diagonal, beautiful image.
The second ribbon goes to Stacey Purkis of Cambridge Camera Club for Bithia sprater showing its proboscis.
Sharp, absolutely through and through. The detail the photographer's captured, gorgeous.
And the third ribbon, Send in the Clowns by Roger Bradshaw of Biggleswade and District Camera Club.
Creative image, using light, definitely giving us something out of the ordinary. Loved it.
And now on to our medals. David has awarded the bronze medal to John McDowell of Cambridge Camera Club for View to Nowhere.
Not only creative, beautifully taken, a perfect example of when we say photography is all about the light.
The silver medal goes to John Pulpit of Cambridge Camera Club for Last Race at Brighton.
You feel you're there. The expression on the faces of the dogs, it's a horrible sport, but you can't but admire the way this has been captured.
And the gold medal goes to Andy Gutteridge of Pico for Gymnast and Ribbon.
As I said, if I'd been there all day for a month, I don't think I'd have got the way that ribbon comes round over her head and behind her without cutting into her in every bit. And again, a superb use of light.
So that concludes our competition. Thank you very much to everyone who's taken part. Thank you very, very much to David for judging for us. And that's all for this year. We hope very much to be back in the church for our usual exhibition and in-person judging next year. I'm sure that our President Brian will echo my sentiments.
Yes, thank you, Alice. Some superb images there, as always today. It's a very, very difficult job for the judging. So thank you very much, David. Some excellent feedback and a great range of scores there. I think you were quite brave, so thank you for that. And congratulations, obviously, to all the ribbon and medal winners. Some excellent images there. And of course, congratulations to Cambridge, and we'll be in touch with you to arrange the handover of the trophy. So as Alice said, thank you everyone for taking part, and we really look forward to hopefully welcoming you all back to St Ives in person next year to see them as prints. I know David said a number of times this would be a great print, and we would love to have seen them as prints. So fingers crossed, next year it will be prints again. So thank you all very much.